The sun beat down mercilessly on Clara Langford's bare shoulders as she stood in the dusty street of Fort Stockton, Texas, watching her mother count $3 silver and examine the whiskey bottle like it was the greatest treasure she'd ever possessed, while the saloon keeper who just paid for Clara looked her up and down with eyes that made her skin crawl. It was August of 1878, and the heat shimmered off the parched earth in waves that distorted everything beyond 20 feet. Clara was 19 years old, rail thin from months of near starvation, her auburn hair matted and tangled, her dress more holes than fabric. She'd known her mother was desperate, known the bottle had become more important than food or shelter or dignity, but she'd never imagined it would come to this. The transaction had happened so quickly. One moment, her mother was begging the saloon keeper for whiskey on credit, and the next she was offering her daughter in exchange for a bottle and whatever coin he'd spare. Clara had stood there frozen, unable to process what was happening until the man handed over the payment, and her mother snatched it with trembling, eager hands. "Mama," Clara whispered, but Rebecca Langford was already turning away, clutching the bottle to her chest like a newborn child, the coins jingling in her pocket. She didn't look back. She didn't say goodbye. She simply walked away down the rutted street, and Clara watched her go with a hollow feeling spreading through her chest that felt worse than hunger, worse than exhaustion, worse than anything she'd ever experienced. The saloon keeper, a thick-bodied man named Hutchins with tobacco-stained teeth and breath that reeked of rot-gut whiskey, grabbed Clara's arm with fingers that dug into her flesh. "Come on then, girl. You work for me now. Got rooms upstairs where you'll earn your keep." Clara tried to pull away, but his grip was iron. Fear flooded through her, making her heart pound so hard she could hear it in her ears. She'd heard stories about the girls who worked in saloons, about what happened to them, about the life that ground them down until there was nothing left but hollow eyes and broken spirits. She opened her mouth to scream, to beg, to do something, anything. "I reckon you got the wrong idea about what just happened here." The voice was calm, measured, and carried an edge of steel that made Hutchins freeze. Clara looked up to see a tall man standing about 10 feet away, his hand resting casually on the revolver at his hip. He wore dusty trail clothes, a worn leather vest over a faded blue shirt, and a wide-brimmed hat that shadowed his face. But even in shadow, Clara could see his eyes, gray as storm clouds and absolutely steady. "This ain't your concern, stranger," Hutchins said, but his voice had lost some of its certainty. "I'm making it my concern." The man took a step closer, and Clara saw he was younger than she'd first thought, maybe mid-20s, with several days' worth of dark stubble on his jaw and trail dust coating his clothes. "Let the girl go." Hutchins' face reddened. "I paid good money for her. Her own mama sold her to me, fair and square. Nothing fair about it, and nothing square either." The stranger's voice remained level, but something in his posture shifted, became more dangerous. "You took advantage of a desperate woman and tried to buy a human being. Now let her go, or we're going to have a problem." Other people on the street had stopped to watch. Clara could feel their eyes on her, could sense the tension crackling in the air like heat lightning. Hutchins' fingers tightened on her arm for a moment, and she thought he might actually try to fight this stranger over her. Then his hand dropped away. "Take her then," Hutchins spat. "Scrawny thing probably wouldn't have been worth it anyway, but I want my money back." The stranger reached into his pocket and pulled out several coins, more than Hutchins had given Clara's mother. He tossed them at the saloon keeper's feet, making him bend down to scramble for them in the dust. While Hutchins was occupied, the stranger closed the distance to Clara and spoke quietly. "You got anywhere to go?" Clara shook her head, unable to find her voice. Up close, she could see his face more clearly. He had strong features, a straight nose, and those remarkable gray eyes that held kindness despite their intensity. A thin scar ran along his left cheekbone, but it didn't detract from his looks, just gave him a harder edge. "My name's Yates Young. I run a ranch about 12 miles outside town. I could use help with cooking and cleaning if you're willing to work. Pays fair wages, and you'd have your own room in the main house. My word as a gentleman that I'll treat you with respect." Clara stared at him, trying to process this sudden turn of fortune. Nothing in her life had prepared her for someone simply helping without wanting something in return. She searched his face for deception, for the ulterior motives that must be lurking behind the offer, but all she saw was sincere concern. "Why?" she managed to ask, her voice cracking. "Why would you help me?" Yates looked back at where Hutchins was still gathering coins, then met her eyes again. "Because you're worth more than a bottle and a coin, a hell of a lot more, and because it's the right thing to do." He offered his hand, calloused and strong. "What do you say?" Clara looked down at his outstretched hand, then back toward where her mother had disappeared around a corner. There was nothing left for her there. No family to return to, no home to shelter in. She had two choices: take this stranger's hand and trust that there was still some goodness in the world, or face whatever Fort Stockton had in store for a destitute young woman alone. She placed her hand in his. Yates' fingers closed around hers, warm and steady, and Clara felt something shift inside her chest. Not hope exactly, not yet, but maybe the memory of what hope had once felt like. "Thank you," she whispered. "Don't thank me yet. It's a working ranch and the work's hard. But it's honest and you'll be safe." He released her hand and gestured toward a hitching post where a large bay horse stood waiting. "That's Denver. He's got a calm temperament. You ever ride before?" Clara shook her head. Her family had never owned a horse, had never owned much of anything except the broken-down wagon they'd traveled in until her father died 2 years ago. "That's all right. I'll teach you." Yates walked to the horse and untied the reins, then returned to Clara's side. "For now, you'll ride with me. We'll get supplies first, some proper clothes for you and food, then head out to the ranch." "That sound acceptable?" Clara nodded, not trusting herself to speak. She was afraid if she said too much, this strange kindness would evaporate like a mirage in the desert heat. Yates led her down the street toward the general store, keeping his stride measured so she could keep pace. People watched them pass with curious eyes, and Clara could feel their speculation following her like a physical weight. In a town like Fort Stockton, gossip spread faster than wildfire, and by sunset, everyone would know that Rebecca Langford had traded her daughter for whiskey, and that Yates Young had intervened. The general store was dim and cool after the blazing street, and Clara's eyes took a moment to adjust. The proprietor, a middle-aged woman with sharp features and an assessing gaze, looked them over as they entered. "Afternoon, Mr. Young," she said. "What can I do for you?" "Afternoon, Mrs. Patterson. I need to outfit this young lady with some proper clothes and necessities. She'll be working at my ranch." Yates' tone was matter-of-fact, offering no explanation beyond the basics. Mrs. Patterson's eyes narrowed slightly as she studied Clara, and Clara could almost see her piecing together the story. But whatever she thought, she kept it to herself. "Let me show you what I have." For the next hour, Mrs. Patterson helped Clara select several practical dresses, undergarments, a sturdy pair of boots, a wide-brimmed hat to protect from the sun, and various necessities Clara hadn't possessed in months. Yates paid for everything without complaint, then added supplies for the ranch: flour, sugar, coffee, bacon, beans, and other staples. Clara watched the coins change hands and tried to calculate how much debt she was accruing, how long it would take to work off such generosity. As if reading her thoughts, Yates said quietly, "These are advance wages. You'll work them off in time, but don't fret about it. I'm not keeping a ledger." "I'll work hard," Clara promised. "I won't let you regret this." "I don't expect I will." He smiled at her, the first real smile she'd seen from him, and it transformed his face from merely handsome to genuinely warm. "You look like someone who understands the value of hard work." They loaded the supplies onto Denver, and then Yates swung up into the saddle with easy grace. He reached down to help Clara up, and after a moment's awkward maneuvering, she found herself seated in front of him, acutely aware of his presence behind her, his arms bracketing her sides as he held the reins. "Comfortable enough?" he asked. Clara nodded, though comfortable wasn't exactly the word. She'd never been this close to a man before, never felt the solid warmth of one at her back or smelled the scent of leather and soap and something distinctly masculine. It wasn't unpleasant, just unfamiliar, and she held herself stiffly, trying not to lean against him. "Relax," Yates said gently. "It's a long ride and you'll be sore as hell tomorrow if you stay that tense. I'm not going to hurt you, Clara, I give you my word." It was the first time he'd used her name, and something about the way he said it, with simple sincerity, made Clara's eyes sting with unexpected tears. She blinked them back fiercely. She'd cried enough over the years, and tears had never fixed anything. Instead, she forced herself to ease back slightly, accepting the support of his presence rather than fighting it. "That's better," Yates said, and urged Denver forward with a subtle shift of his legs. They rode out of Fort Stockton heading northwest, and Clara watched the town shrink behind them with mixed feelings. She'd only been there 2 weeks, since her mother had spent the last of their money on whiskey and they'd been forced to stop traveling. Before that, it had been a succession of towns and camps, each one worse than the last, as her mother's drinking consumed everything. Clara had tried to find work, tried to keep them fed and sheltered, but Rebecca had sabotaged every attempt, stealing Clara's wages for more liquor, causing scenes that got them thrown out of boarding houses, making it impossible to maintain any stability. And now here Clara was, riding away with a stranger toward an unknown future, and somehow it felt like the most security she'd had in years. The landscape around Fort Stockton was harsh and beautiful in equal measure. Rocky outcroppings rose from the dusty earth, dotted with scrub brush and stunted mesquite trees. The sky stretched endlessly overhead, a blue so deep it almost hurt to look at, and the sun hammered down with relentless intensity. Clara was grateful for the new hat Yates had bought her, and for the steady pace Denver maintained that created a slight breeze. "You from around here?" Yates asked after they'd been riding for a while. "No, sir. We came from Missouri originally. My father had a farm there, but he died of fever 2 years ago. After that, Mama started drinking heavy and we lost the farm. We've been moving ever since, trying to find somewhere she could settle, but—" Clara trailed off, not wanting to speak ill of her mother despite everything. "But the bottle had too strong a hold," Yates finished quietly. "I've seen it before. It's a demon that's hard to fight, especially after loss. Did you know my mother before today?" "No. I was in town picking up supplies, heard the commotion and saw what was happening." His voice hardened slightly. "Couldn't stand by and let Hutchins add you to his collection of saloon girls. He's a bastard who preys on desperate women." Clara absorbed this, grateful beyond words that Yates had been there, that he'd cared enough to intervene. "What about you? Are you from Texas?" "Born in Tennessee, actually. Came out here after the war ended in '65. I was 17, full of ideas about making my fortune. Worked as a ranch hand for years, saved every penny, and finally bought my own spread 3 years ago." It's not much yet, but it's mine, and I'm building something real." "The war," Clara repeated. She would have been just a child then, but she remembered the tension, the fear, the way her father had refused to talk about it. "You fought." "I did, though I try not to think on it much. Saw things no one should see, did things I'm not proud of. But it's over now, and I'm focused on the future." He shifted slightly in the saddle. "What about you? What do you want for your future, Clara?" No one had ever asked her that before. Her father had expected her to marry some local boy eventually, and her mother had needed her too desperately to consider Clara's dreams. Clara had never had the luxury of thinking beyond the next meal, the next town, the next crisis. "I don't rightly know," she admitted. "I suppose I never thought I'd have a future to plan. Just surviving took all my energy." "Well, you've got time now to figure it out. No pressure, no rush. Just honest work and a chance to catch your breath." Yates' voice was kind, and Clara felt some of the tension she'd been carrying for months start to ease. They rode in comfortable silence for a while, and Clara found herself relaxing despite herself, lulled by Denver's steady rhythm and the warmth of the day. Her head started to droop, exhaustion from weeks of poor sleep and constant stress finally catching up with her. "Go ahead and rest if you need to," Yates said softly. "I've got you." Clara meant to protest, meant to stay alert and vigilant, but her body had other ideas. Her eyes drifted closed, and she felt herself leaning back against Yates' solid chest. His arm came around her waist, holding her secure, and for the first time in longer than she could remember, Clara felt safe enough to sleep. She woke to Yates' gentle voice saying, "We're here." Clara blinked, disoriented, and realized the sun had moved significantly across the sky. She'd slept for at least an hour, maybe more, and she flushed with embarrassment. "I'm sorry. I didn't mean to. Don't apologize. You clearly needed it." Yates helped her down from the saddle, and Clara's legs nearly buckled when her feet hit the ground. He steadied her with a hand on her elbow. "Take a minute. Riding takes some getting used to." Clara looked around, taking in her new surroundings. Yates' ranch was situated in a shallow valley with a creek running through it, the water glinting in the late afternoon sun. The main house was a solid adobe structure with a covered porch and shuttered windows. Behind it stood a barn, a corral with several horses, and various outbuildings. It wasn't large or fancy, but it looked well maintained and purposeful. "It's beautiful," Clara said, and meant it. After weeks of squalid camps and decrepit boarding houses, the simple order of the ranch felt like paradise. "Thank you. I'm proud of what I've built, though there's still plenty to do." Yates led Denver toward the barn, and Clara followed. "The other hands live in the bunkhouse over there. Right now I've got 2 men working for me, Santos and Jim. Good workers, decent men. They'll be respectful or they'll answer to me." He said it casually, but Clara heard the steel beneath the words and felt reassured. Yates unsaddled Denver and began rubbing him down with practiced efficiency, and Clara watched, trying to learn the process for future reference. "Can I help?" she asked. "Not tonight. You've had a hard day. But yes, I'll teach you horse care and everything else you'll need to know. Part of ranch work is understanding how everything fits together." He finished with Denver and led him to a stall with fresh water and feed. "Come on, let me show you the house." The interior of the adobe house was simple but comfortable. The main room served as both kitchen and living area, with a large stone fireplace, a sturdy wooden table and chairs, and shelves holding dishes and supplies. 2 doors led to separate bedrooms, and Yates pointed to the smaller one. "That'll be yours. It's not much, but the bed's comfortable and you'll have privacy. There's a pump out back for water, and the outhouse is behind that. Saturday nights I heat water for a bath, and you're welcome to do the same. I don't stand on ceremony here, Clara. This is a working ranch, and we all pitch in where needed. Clara stepped into the small bedroom and felt tears threaten again. A real bed with a quilted coverlet, a small dresser, a washstand with a basin and pitcher, and a window with actual glass and curtains. It was more than she'd had in 2 years, more than she'd hoped for when she woke up that morning. "Thank you," she managed, her voice thick. "Mr. Young, I don't know how to thank you for all this. Call me Yates. Mr. Young makes me feel old." He smiled at her from the doorway. "And you can thank me by settling in and getting some rest. Tomorrow's soon enough to start work. I'll make us some supper." "I can cook," Clara protested. "That's supposed to be my job." "Tomorrow," Yates said firmly. "Tonight you rest. That's an order from your employer." He left her alone, and Clara sank down onto the bed, running her hands over the quilt. It was well made, the stitching even and precise, and she wondered if Yates had a woman who'd made it for him. A wife or a sweetheart. She realized she knew almost nothing about him, this man who'd saved her from a terrible fate and brought her to his home. Clara changed out of her ragged old dress into one of the new ones Mrs. Patterson had helped her select. It was plain brown calico, practical and sturdy, but it fit properly and was clean and whole. She used the water in the pitcher to wash her face and hands, scrubbing away layers of dirt and grime, then attempted to comb through her tangled hair with her fingers. She'd need to do a proper washing soon, but even this small improvement made her feel more human. The smell of cooking bacon drew her back to the main room, where Yates was working at the stove with the ease of someone who'd been taking care of himself for a long time. He'd removed his hat and vest, and his dark hair was slightly wavy, curling at his collar. "Sit down," he said without turning around. "Food'll be ready in a few minutes." Clara sat at the table and watched him cook. He moved with economy and purpose, no wasted motion, and soon he was setting plates of bacon, beans, and cornbread in front of them both. It was simple fare, but after subsisting on scraps and whatever she could beg or scavenge, it looked like a feast. They ate in silence for a while, and Clara tried not to wolf down her food despite her hunger. She forced herself to eat slowly, to show she had manners and breeding, even if her circumstances had reduced her to poverty. "Where did you learn to cook?" she asked. "Trail life and necessity. When you're on your own, you learn to take care of yourself or you go hungry." Yates pushed the cornbread toward her. "Eat your fill. There's plenty, and you need to put some meat on your bones." "I'll earn my keep," Clara said. "I promise I'll work hard and you won't regret taking me in." Yates set down his fork and looked at her directly, his gray eyes serious. "Clara, I need you to understand something. You don't owe me anything beyond honest work for honest pay. I didn't buy you from Hutchins, I freed you from him. There's a difference. You're not property, not a debt, not a burden. You're an employee, and I'll treat you with the same respect I'd give any worker." "Clear," Clara nodded, throat tight with emotion. In her experience, men didn't help women without expecting something in return, but Yates seemed genuine in his intentions. She wanted to believe him, wanted to trust that this wasn't some elaborate trick. "Clear," she whispered. "Good. Now finish your supper and get some proper sleep. Tomorrow I'll introduce you to Santos and Jim, show you around the ranch, and we'll figure out your duties. The work's not hard, just consistent. I need meals cooked, house kept clean, maybe help with the garden when harvest comes. Think you can handle that?" "Yes, sir. I mean, yes, Yates." He smiled at her attempt to use his first name, and Clara felt warmth spread through her chest that had nothing to do with the food. She was starting to believe that maybe, just maybe, her luck had finally changed. After supper, Yates cleaned up despite Clara's protests, then showed her how to bank the fire in the fireplace and where everything was kept. By the time full dark had fallen, Clara was swaying on her feet with exhaustion. "Go on to bed," Yates said gently. Sleep as long as you need. The work will still be here tomorrow." Clara retreated to her small room and closed the door. She lay down on the bed, still wearing her new dress, and pulled the quilt over herself. Through the wall, she could hear Yates moving around in the main room, the ordinary sounds of someone settling in for the night. It was comforting in a way she hadn't expected, this evidence that she wasn't alone, that someone else was near. She thought about her mother, wondered if Rebecca had already drunk through the bottle Hutchins had given her, if she'd felt even a moment of regret for what she'd done. Part of Clara wanted to hate her, but mostly she just felt a deep sadness for what they'd both lost. Her mother had been a different person before her father died, loving and attentive and full of life. The woman who traded her daughter for whiskey was a hollow shell, consumed by grief and addiction. Clara closed her eyes and sent up a silent prayer that her mother would find peace somehow, and that she herself would prove worthy of the second chance Yates had given her. Then she let sleep claim her, falling into the first truly restful slumber she'd had in months. She woke to sunlight streaming through the window and the sound of roosters crowing. For a moment Clara didn't know where she was and panic fluttered in her chest. Then memory returned. Yates, the ranch, safety. She sat up quickly, worried she'd overslept and failed her first day, and hurried out to the main room. Yates was already up, dressed in work clothes and sipping coffee by the fireplace. He looked up when she emerged and smiled. "Morning. Sleep well?" "Yes, thank you. I'm sorry I overslept." "I should have been up making breakfast." "You're fine. It's barely past dawn." "Coffee," Clara nodded gratefully, and Yates poured her a cup. The coffee was strong and bitter, but it chased away the last cobwebs of sleep. She stood by the fireplace, warming her hands on the cup, and studied Yates in the morning light. He looked tired, she realized, with dark circles under his eyes suggesting he hadn't slept as well as she had. "You have nightmares?" The question escaped before Clara could think better of it, and she immediately regretted it. "I'm sorry, that's not my business." "Sometimes," Yates admitted. "The war's been over 13 years, but some memories don't fade. I manage." He set down his own cup. "How about we get you started on breakfast while I go check on the horses? Eggs and bacon are in the cold box out back, and there's bread from yesterday that'll toast up fine." Clara was grateful for the change of subject and the clear instructions. She set about preparing breakfast, finding her way around the kitchen with growing confidence. By the time Yates returned with 2 other men, she had food on the table and fresh coffee brewing. "Clara, this is Santos and Jim," Yates said, gesturing to his ranch hands. Santos was Mexican, maybe in his 40s, with weathered features and kind eyes. Jim was younger, probably close to Clara's own age, sandy-haired and lean with an easy smile. "Pleasure to meet you, Miss Clara," Jim said, removing his hat. "Welcome to the ranch," Santos added in lightly accented English. "It will be good to have home cooking again instead of Yates' attempts." "My cooking's not that bad," Yates protested, but he was grinning. "Your cooking is terrible," Santos said cheerfully. "But you have many other good qualities, so we forgive you." The easy banter between the men made Clara relax. She'd been worried about how the ranch hands would treat her, given the circumstances of her arrival, but their manner was respectful and welcoming. They all sat down to breakfast, and the conversation flowed naturally around ranch business, which fences needed mending, how the cattle were looking, whether they should move the herd to the eastern pasture. Clara listened and learned, piecing together how the ranch operated. Yates raised cattle primarily, with a small herd of horses and some chickens for eggs. The work was seasonal and demanding, but Yates clearly took pride in doing it well. He spoke to Santos and Jim as equals, asking their opinions and listening to their input, and they responded with obvious respect and loyalty. After breakfast, the men headed out to their work, and Clara cleaned up the kitchen. Then, Yates returned to show her around the ranch properly. He introduced her to each horse by name, showed her how to feed the chickens and collect eggs, pointed out the garden plot that would need tending come spring, and explained the rhythm of ranch life. His patience was endless, his explanations clear, and Clara found herself relaxing into the routine of it all. "The house is your domain," Yates said. "I won't dictate how you keep it or what meals you cook, as long as the work gets done and we're fed. If you need supplies from town, make a list and I'll pick them up, or we can go together. You're not a prisoner here, Clara. You can come and go as you please." "I don't have anywhere else to go," Clara said quietly. "Maybe not now, but someday you might. I want you to know you're free to leave whenever you choose. This is a job, not an obligation." Yates looked at her seriously. "I mean that." Clara nodded, moved by his insistence on her autonomy. Most men in his position would have taken advantage, would have expected favors beyond cooking and cleaning. But Yates seemed genuinely determined to treat her as a person with rights and choices. The days fell into a comfortable rhythm. Clara rose early to make breakfast, cleaned the house, prepared lunch, tended the chickens and garden, made dinner, and handled the 100 small tasks that kept a household running. It was hard work, but it was honest and satisfying in a way nothing in her life had been for years. She was contributing, earning her keep, building something Yates and the ranch hands treated her with unfailing courtesy. Jim was friendly and talkative, telling stories about his adventures before settling on the ranch. Santos was quieter but no less kind, sometimes bringing Clara wildflowers he'd found while working, or showing her better ways to prepare the Mexican dishes he'd grown up with. And Yates was steady as a rock, always there with a kind word or a helping hand, teaching her to ride and rope and do all the things that ranch life required. Weeks passed, and Clara began to fill out, her hollow cheeks rounding with regular meals, her eyes losing their haunted look. She made new dresses with fabric Yates bought in town, adding curtains for the windows and small touches that made the house feel more like a home. And slowly, carefully, she began to trust that this new life was real and lasting. One evening about 2 months after Clara's arrival, she and Yates were sitting on the porch after supper, watching the sun set over the western hills. It had become something of a ritual, this quiet time when the work was done, and they could simply exist without purpose or pressure. "You've done wonders with this place," Yates said. "The house feels like a home now, not just a structure. The meals are delicious. Even the horses seem happier." He smiled at her. "I'm glad you're here, Clara." Clara felt warmth spread through her chest at his words. "I'm glad, too." "You saved my life, Yates. I know you don't like to hear it, but it's true. If you hadn't stepped in that day, I don't know what would have become of me. You would have survived. You're stronger than you think." Yates looked out at the sunset, his profile sharp against the fading light. "But I am glad I was there, glad I could help." They sat in comfortable silence for a while, and Clara found herself studying Yates when he wasn't looking. Over the past weeks, she'd come to appreciate more than just his kindness. He was handsome in a rugged way, with those striking gray eyes and strong features. More than that, he was good, truly good in a way that was rare. He worked hard, treated everyone fairly, and carried himself with quiet dignity. And lately, Clara had started noticing things. The way her heart beat faster when he smiled at her, the way she looked forward to their evening talks, the way she caught herself finding excuses to be near him. She was falling in love with him, she realized with a start. The knowledge should have frightened her, but instead it felt right, natural, like something that had been growing quietly all along and was only now making itself known. "Yates," she said softly, "can I ask you something, anything? Why haven't you married? A man like you, with property and a good reputation, surely you could find a wife if you wanted one." Yates was quiet for a long moment. "I suppose I've been waiting for the right woman. Someone who understands this life, who wants to build something together rather than just seeking security or status. Someone real." He glanced at her, and Clara thought she saw something meaningful in his eyes, but the fading light made it hard to be sure. "What about you? Did you have suitors back in Missouri?" "No. My father was protective, didn't want me courting before I was 20. Then he died, and after that there was no time for romance. Mama needed me, and we were always moving." Clara paused. "I never really thought about love or marriage. It seemed like something that happened to other people, not me." "And now," Clara's breath caught at the question, at the quiet intensity in Yates' voice. She turned to look at him fully and found him watching her with an expression that made her pulse race. "Now I think maybe I was wrong. Maybe those things are possible for me after all." Yates reached out slowly, giving her time to pull away, and cupped her cheek with his calloused hand. His touch was gentle, reverent, and Clara leaned into it instinctively. "Clara, these past weeks with you have been the best I can remember. You've brought light and warmth to this place, and to me. I don't want to presume, don't want to make you uncomfortable, but I need you to know that my feelings for you have grown into something beyond employer and employee." Clara's heart was hammering now, hope and fear and joy all tangled together. "What kind of feelings?" "The kind that make me think about the future differently. The kind that make me want to give you the world if you'll let me." Yates' thumb stroked her cheekbone. "I'm in love with you, Clara. Have been for weeks now, if I'm honest. I know the circumstances of how we met weren't conventional, and I don't want you to feel obligated in any way, but I had to tell you. You deserve to know." Clara felt tears slip down her cheeks, but they were happy tears, cleansing tears. "I love you too," she whispered. "I was so afraid to hope, so afraid to believe this could be real, but I do. I love you, Yates Young." Yates leaned in slowly, and Clara met him halfway, their lips coming together in a kiss that was soft and sweet and full of promise. It was Clara's first kiss, and it felt like coming home, like finding something she hadn't known she'd been searching for all along. When they finally pulled apart, both were smiling. "I want to court you properly," Yates said. "Want to do this right, give you the romance and respect you deserve. Will you let me?" "Yes," Clara said simply, and kissed him again. The next months were the happiest of Clara's life. Yates courted her with old-fashioned, gentlemanly behavior, bringing her wildflowers, taking her on rides to beautiful spots around the ranch, sitting with her in the evenings and talking about everything and nothing. He never pushed for more than she was ready to give, never made her feel pressured or uncomfortable. He simply loved her, openly and honestly, and Clara bloomed under his attention like a flower in spring rain. Santos and Jim figured out what was happening quickly and teased Yates mercilessly while being unfailingly respectful to Clara. The ranch prospered as they all worked together, and when Yates went to town for supplies, Clara sometimes accompanied him. She could see the speculation in people's eyes, the whispers that followed them, but she held her head high. Let them talk. She knew the truth of what they had, and that was all that mattered. Winter came to West Texas, cold nights and occasional frost, and Clara and Yates grew closer still. They hadn't been physically intimate beyond kissing, and Clara appreciated Yates' restraint even as her own desires grew. He wanted to marry her first, he'd said, wanted to do things properly and give her a wedding and a future with no shadows. On Christmas Eve, Yates took Clara to town under the pretense of buying supplies. Fort Stockton was decorated for the holiday, and despite the memories the town held, Clara found herself enjoying the festive atmosphere. They shopped together, Yates insisting on buying Clara a new winter coat and gloves, and then he led her to the small church at the edge of town. "I have something to ask you," he said, taking both her hands in his. "And I wanted to do it properly in a place of God." Clara's heart began to race. She watched as Yates reached into his pocket and pulled out a simple gold ring with a small ruby set in it. "Clara Langford, you came into my life when I least expected it, and you've changed everything. You've made my house a home, my ranch a haven, my heart full. I love you more than I thought it was possible to love someone. Will you marry me? Will you be my wife, my partner, my companion for all the days we're given?" Clara was crying now, tears of pure joy streaming down her face. "Yes," she said. "Yes, Yates, I'll marry you. Nothing would make me happier." Yates slipped the ring onto her finger and it fit perfectly. Then he pulled her into his arms and kissed her deeply, right there in front of the church, not caring who might see. Clara kissed him back with all the love and gratitude and hope that filled her heart, and when they finally broke apart, she was laughing through her tears. "When?" she asked. "As soon as you want. Tomorrow if you'll have me. I don't want to wait any more, Clara. I want you as my wife, want to start our life together officially. Then let's do it soon. After the new year, maybe. Give me time to make a decent dress and to feel ready. Anything you want. I'd wait forever if you asked me to." They told Santos and Jim that evening, and both men were delighted, clapping Yates on the back and congratulating Clara with genuine warmth. The ranch felt even more like home now, full of happiness and anticipation, and Clara threw herself into preparations for the wedding. She made her wedding dress from white muslin Yates bought in town, sewing by lamplight in the evenings and creating something simple but beautiful. She had no family to invite, but Yates had friends from neighboring ranches, and Santos and Jim would serve as witnesses. The ceremony would be small and intimate at the church in Fort Stockton, followed by a celebration at the ranch. January brought cold, clear skies, and the date they'd chosen, January 15th, 1879. Clara woke that morning with butterflies in her stomach but no doubts. She dressed carefully in her new gown, and Yates waited for her in the church, handsome in a new suit with his dark hair combed back and his gray eyes bright with emotion. The ceremony was simple and heartfelt. The preacher spoke about love and commitment, about partnership and faith, and when it came time for vows, both Clara and Yates spoke from their hearts. Clara promised to love, honor, and cherish Yates for all their days, to be his partner in all things, to build a life and home with him. Yates promised to protect, provide for, and treasure Clara, to treat her always as an equal, to love her without reservation or condition. When the preacher pronounced them husband and wife, Yates kissed Clara with such tenderness that she felt her soul expand to hold all the happiness she was feeling. They were married. She was Clara Young now, no longer adrift and alone but anchored and cherished. The celebration afterward was joyful and rowdy. Neighboring ranchers and their families came to wish them well, and Santos had made a feast of traditional Mexican wedding foods. There was music and dancing, and Yates whirled Clara around until she was dizzy with laughter. It was nothing like the fairy tale weddings wealthy people had, but it was perfect in its simplicity and sincerity. As evening fell and the last guests departed, Yates scooped Clara up in his arms and carried her over the threshold of their home. Their home now, truly and completely. He set her down gently in their bedroom, the room that had been his but was now theirs, and looked at her with such love that Clara felt tears threaten again. "I can't believe you're real," he said softly. "That this is real, that you're my wife. I'm real, Clara promised. And I'm yours if you'll have me. Always, Yates said and kissed her. Their wedding night was tender and careful, with Yates taking time to make sure Clara felt safe and loved and cherished. He was patient with her inexperience, guiding her gently and making the whole experience beautiful rather than frightening. And when they finally came together fully, Clara understood what all the poetry and songs had been trying to express. This was love, physical and spiritual entwined, two people becoming one in the most intimate way possible. Afterward, they lay tangled together in the darkness, and Clara rested her head on Yates' chest, listening to his heartbeat beneath her ear. "Thank you," she whispered. "For what?" "For seeing me that day in Fort Stockton, for caring enough to help, for loving me when I thought I was unlovable, for giving me a future when I had none." Clara lifted her head to look at him. "For telling me I was worth more than a bottle and a coin." Yates cupped her face in his hands. "You're worth everything, Clara. Everything I have, everything I am, it's all yours. Never doubt that." They kissed again, sealing the promise, and then settled into sleep wrapped in each other's arms. The future stretched before them, full of possibility and hope, and Clara had never felt more at peace. The months that followed were full of hard work and deep contentment. Clara threw herself into being a rancher's wife, learning everything she could about the business and becoming an invaluable partner to Yates. She started a kitchen garden that flourished under her care, put up preserves and pickles, and even learned to help with the less intense ranch work. Yates taught her to ride properly, and she discovered a love of horses that matched his own. Santos and Jim continued working the ranch, and the four of them became like family. They shared meals and stories, celebrated small victories, and weathered difficulties together. The ranch began to prosper as Yates expanded the herd and improved the property, and Clara's management of the household made everything run smoothly. Spring came, bringing warmth and wildflowers and new calves. Clara worked alongside the men during calving season, staying up through the night when needed and learning to assist with difficult births. It was exhausting, messy work, but she found satisfaction in helping bring new life into the world. By summer, Clara realized she was carrying new life of her own. She'd missed her monthly courses and felt queasy in the mornings, and when she went to the doctor in Fort Stockton, he confirmed what she'd suspected. She was going to have a baby. The news filled her with joy and terror in equal measure. She'd never really thought about being a mother, had never imagined herself as part of that future, but now that it was happening, she wanted it desperately. She told Yates that evening as they sat on the porch, watching the sunset. "I have news," she said, taking his hand. "I'm expecting. We're going to have a baby." Yates' face went through a series of expressions: shock, wonder, joy, and then fierce protectiveness. He pulled Clara into his arms, holding her carefully as if she might break. "A baby," he repeated. "Our baby." "Clara, that's the most wonderful news I've ever heard." "You're happy then?" "Happy. I'm over the moon, terrified too, but mostly just incredibly happy." He pulled back to look at her, his eyes bright. "We're going to be parents. You're going to be a mother." They spent the rest of the evening making plans and dreaming about the future. Boy or girl, names they liked, what kind of parents they wanted to be. Yates was adamant that he would be involved, not the kind of distant father who left all the child care to his wife. He wanted to be present and active, to know his children and be part of their lives. Clara's pregnancy progressed smoothly despite the heat of summer. She continued her work as long as she could, though Yates and the others increasingly insisted she take it easy. By fall, her belly was round and prominent, and she'd had to alter all her dresses to accommodate her changing shape. She felt ungainly and awkward, but Yates insisted she'd never been more beautiful, and the way he looked at her made her believe it. The baby came in early October, on a cool night when the stars were bright overhead. Clara's labor was long and difficult, and there were moments when she thought she couldn't go on, but Yates stayed with her the whole time, holding her hand and encouraging her. The midwife from town handled the delivery with practiced efficiency, and just before dawn, Clara gave birth to a healthy baby boy. They named him Thomas, after Yates' father, and when the midwife placed him in Clara's arms, she fell in love all over again. He was perfect, tiny and red-faced and squalling, with a dusting of dark hair and eyes that might turn gray like his father's. Clara looked up at Yates, who was staring at their son with an expression of absolute wonder, and felt her heart expand to hold even more love than she'd thought possible. "We made him," she whispered. "Look what we made." "He's perfect," Yates said hoarsely, reaching out to touch Thomas' tiny hand with one finger, just like his mother. The first months of parenthood were exhausting and overwhelming, but also filled with incredible joy. Thomas was a good baby, healthy and strong, and both Clara and Yates doted on him. Yates was true to his word about being an involved father, changing diapers and walking the floor with Thomas when he was fussy, and taking him out to the barn to see the horses as soon as he was old enough. Santos and Jim were delighted with the new addition, and both became honorary uncles who spoiled Thomas shamelessly. The ranch continued to prosper, and life settled into a new rhythm that included midnight feedings and baby laughter and the constant wonder of watching Thomas grow and change. When Thomas was 6 months old, Clara received a letter forwarded from the general store in Fort Stockton. She didn't recognize the handwriting, and when she opened it, she found it was from a minister in El Paso. Her mother, Rebecca Langford, had died of liver failure in December. She'd been in the charity hospital there, and in her final days, she'd asked the minister to contact her daughter to let her know she was sorry for everything. The minister had tracked Clara down through inquiries in Fort Stockton and wanted her to know that Rebecca had died peacefully and had been buried in the church cemetery. Clara read the letter twice, feeling a complicated mix of emotions. Grief for the mother she'd lost long before the actual death, relief that Rebecca's suffering was finally over, and a kind of closure she hadn't realized she needed. She showed the letter to Yates, and he held her while she cried for what might have been, for the relationship they'd never had a chance to repair. "You want to visit the grave?" Yates asked gently. Clara thought about it and then shook her head. "No. That woman wasn't really my mother, not the mother I remember from childhood. She died when my father did. This is just the final end." She looked up at Yates. "My family is here now, you and Thomas, Santos and Jim, this ranch. This is where I belong." Yates kissed her forehead. "Always," he promised. "You'll always belong here with us." Time moved forward as it always does. Thomas grew into a bright, energetic toddler, and then Clara was pregnant again. Their second child, a daughter they named Emily, arrived in the spring of 1881. She had Clara's auburn hair and Yates' gray eyes, and she was the darling of the ranch from the moment she drew breath. The ranch continued to expand and prosper. Yates bought more land, increased the herd, and built a new barn and additional corrals. Santos married a woman from town and brought her to live in a small house Yates built for them on the property. Jim eventually moved on to start his own spread with Yates' help and blessing, and new ranch hands were hired to take his place. Clara managed the household with calm efficiency, raising the children and maintaining the home while also keeping the ranch books and helping with planning. She and Yates were true partners in every sense, and their love had only deepened over the years. The passion was still there, but it was layered now with comfort and trust and shared history. They had 2 more children over the next years, another son, Daniel, born in 1883, and finally another daughter, Sarah, in 1886. The house that had once seemed spacious was now filled with noise and laughter and the constant motion of children. Clara sometimes felt overwhelmed by the chaos, but more often she felt blessed beyond measure. One evening in 1888, 10 years after that fateful day in Fort Stockton, Clara and Yates sat on the porch watching their children play in the yard. Thomas was helping 9-year-old Emily collect eggs, while 6-year-old Daniel chased chickens, and 3-year-old Sarah toddled after him laughing. The sun was setting in brilliant oranges and reds, and the air was sweet with the scent of blooming desert flowers. "You ever think about that day?" Clara asked quietly. "The day we met." Yates took her hand, lacing their fingers together. "Sometimes. I think about how easily things could have gone differently. If I'd been 10 minutes later, if I'd decided not to go to town that day, if I hadn't cared enough to intervene. I think about what you said to me, that I was worth more than a bottle and a coin." Clara squeezed his hand. "No one had ever told me I had worth before. You saw value in me when I couldn't see it in myself. I saw who you really were beneath the circumstances, saw the strength and resilience and beauty that life had tried to beat out of you but couldn't." Yates turned to look at her, and Clara saw all the love and devotion of their years together shining in his eyes. "You've made me happier than I ever imagined being, given me a family, a real home, a purpose beyond just existing. I'd do it all again in a heartbeat, Clara. Every single moment." "So would I," Clara said softly. "Even the hard parts, because they led me here. To you, to our children, to this life we've built together." They sat in comfortable silence as the sun finished setting and the first stars appeared. The children's laughter rang out in the gathering darkness, and from the barn came the sounds of Santos singing in Spanish as he finished the evening chores. Somewhere in the distance, cattle lowed and horses whinnied, the familiar sounds of ranch life that had become as natural as breathing. Clara thought about the girl she'd been 10 years ago, hollow-eyed and hopeless, standing in a dusty street watching her mother walk away. That girl would never have believed this future was possible, would never have dared to hope for love and family and security. But life had proven full of surprises, and sometimes those surprises were beautiful. Thomas came running up to the porch, his face flushed with excitement. "Papa, Mama, come see. One of the chickens laid an egg with 2 yolks. Emily says it's good luck." Yates stood and held out his hand to Clara. "Come on, Mrs. Young. Let's go see this miraculous egg." Clara took his hand and let him pull her up, and together they walked down to join their children. The evening air was cool against her skin, and Yates' hand was warm in hers, and everything felt exactly right. This was home. This was family. This was love. As they examined the double-yolked egg and listened to Emily's excited explanations, Clara caught Yates' eye over the children's heads. He smiled at her, that same warm smile that had made her trust him 10 years ago. And she smiled back, full of gratitude and joy and deep, abiding love. The years continued to pass, bringing both challenges and blessings. They weathered droughts and harsh winters, celebrated births and mourned deaths, watched their children grow and their ranch flourish. Santos and his wife had children of their own, and the two families became deeply intertwined, celebrating holidays and milestones together. Thomas grew into a fine young man, serious and hardworking like his father, with a natural skill with horses that made him invaluable on the ranch. Emily was bright and spirited, with a quick wit and a kind heart that drew people to her. Daniel was more adventurous, always pushing boundaries and exploring, but fundamentally good-natured. And Sarah was the baby, sweet and affectionate, with a gift for music that delighted everyone. Clara and Yates grew older together, their dark hair gaining streaks of silver, their faces gaining lines that told the story of their shared life. But their love never faded. If anything, it grew stronger, tempered by time and tested by life's inevitable difficulties. They faced loss when Santos died of a heart attack in his fields in 1895, and Clara and Yates helped his widow and children through their grief. They celebrated when Thomas married a nice girl from a neighboring ranch in 1897, and again when Emily found love with a young lawyer in town. They worried through Daniel's brief period of rebellion before he settled down and found his place on the ranch. And they cherished every moment with Sarah, who remained unmarried but happy, living on the ranch and teaching piano to children from neighboring families. Through it all, the ranch remained a constant, the physical manifestation of everything Clara and Yates had built together. It had grown from a modest operation to one of the most successful ranches in the area, known for quality cattle and honest dealings. Yates had a reputation as a fair man who paid well and treated his workers with respect, and Clara was known for her kindness and practical wisdom. In 1899, Clara and Yates celebrated their 20th wedding anniversary with a party that brought together everyone whose lives they'd touched over the years. Friends and family filled their home and yard, and there was food and music and dancing that lasted well into the night. Clara looked around at all the faces, at the life they'd created, and felt overwhelmed with gratitude. Later that night, after everyone had gone home and the house was quiet, Clara and Yates lay in bed together, tired but happy. Clara's head rested on Yates' shoulder, his arm around her, their bodies fitting together with the ease of long practice. 20 years, Clara mused. It seems impossible that so much time has passed, but also like we've always been together. Best 20 years of my life, Yates said, pressing a kiss to her hair. Every single day with you has been a gift, Clara, even the hard days, because we faced them together. Do you remember what you said to me that first day, when you offered me work? I said you were worth more than a bottle and a coin. You saw something in me that I couldn't see in myself. You gave me back my dignity and my hope. You saved me in every way a person can be saved. Clara lifted her head to look at him. I hope you know how grateful I am, how much I love you, how blessed I feel to have spent these years with you. Yates cupped her face gently, his gray eyes soft in the lamplight. The blessing has been mine, Clara. You took this house and made it a home. You took this lonely cowboy and gave him a family. You took this ranch and helped build it into something that will outlast us both. I'm the one who should be grateful. They kissed, a kiss full of tenderness and love and shared history, and Clara felt the same flutter in her chest that she'd felt 20 years ago when Yates first touched her. Some things never faded, she realized. Some loves were eternal, binding two souls together so tightly that nothing could separate them. The new century arrived, bringing changes to the world but not to the core of who Clara and Yates were, or what they'd built together. The ranch continued to prosper under their management, and then gradually under Thomas's leadership, as Yates began to slow down with age. Thomas proved himself a capable rancher, and with his wife, he started their own family tradition. Clara became a grandmother, then a great-grandmother, watching her family tree spread and flourish. Each new baby felt like a miracle, a continuation of the love that she and Yates had kindled 20 years ago in the aftermath of despair. She held her grandchildren and told them stories about the old days, about the Wild West that was slowly being tamed, about their grandfather who had been strong and brave and kind. As the years advanced, Clara and Yates spent more time on their porch, watching the sunset and reminiscing about their life together. Their steps were slower now, their bodies marked by decades of hard work and living, but their love remained constant. They held hands like young sweethearts, spoke with the ease of old friends, and looked at each other with eyes that still saw the people they'd fallen in love with all those years ago. In the spring of 1908, Yates became ill. It started as a cough that wouldn't go away, then developed into something more serious. The doctor said his lungs were failing, likely from years of dust and hard work, and there was nothing to be done but keep him comfortable. Yates faced his approaching death with the same calm dignity he'd brought to everything else in his life, more concerned about Clara than himself. "I don't want to leave you," he said one evening as they sat together on the porch, wrapped in blankets against the spring chill. His voice was weak but steady. "These 30 years with you have been the greatest joy of my life, and I want 30 more." Clara held his hand tightly, tears streaming down her face. "I don't want you to go either. But if you must, know that you've given me a life beyond anything I ever dreamed possible. You showed me what love could be, what family meant, what home felt like. You saved me, Yates Young, in every way that matters." "You saved me too," Yates said softly. "Gave me purpose and meaning and a family to love. I'd do it all again, Clara. Every single moment, every choice that led me to that street in Fort Stockton 30 years ago. You were worth more than a bottle and a coin. You were worth everything." They sat together as the sun set, and Clara held Yates close, memorizing the feel of him, the sound of his breathing, the warmth of his body against hers. That night, surrounded by his family and held in Clara's arms, Yates Young passed peacefully from this world, his last words a whispered "I love you" to the woman who had been his everything. Clara mourned deeply, but she didn't break. Yates had given her too much strength for that, too much purpose and meaning. She continued to live on the ranch, surrounded by her children and grandchildren, managing the household and offering wisdom when asked. She became the matriarch of the family, the living link to their history, the embodiment of the love story that had started it all. She would sit on the porch in the evenings, and sometimes she could almost feel Yates beside her, could almost hear his voice in the wind. The ranch continued to thrive under Thomas's leadership, and Clara took comfort in knowing that what she and Yates had built would continue long after they were both gone. On warm summer evenings, Clara would gather the grandchildren around and tell them the story of how their grandfather had saved her, how he'd seen worth in her when no one else did, how he'd loved her completely and built a life with her that had flourished beyond their wildest dreams. She wanted them to know where they came from, to understand the love and sacrifice and hard work that had created the world they lived in. "Your grandfather was the finest man I ever knew," she would tell them. "He taught me that one person's kindness can change everything, that love is a choice we make every day, and that family is the greatest treasure we can have. Remember that, live by that, and pass it on to your own children someday." Clara lived to be 83 years old, spending her final years surrounded by the family that had grown from the love she and Yates shared. She remained sharp and engaged until the end, still managing to climb onto a horse occasionally and ride out to her favorite spots on the ranch. When she finally passed in the summer of 1922, she went peacefully in her sleep, and her family laid her to rest beside Yates under a spreading oak tree on the ranch property. Their graves were marked with simple headstones that bore their names, dates, and a shared epitaph that Thomas had chosen. Together they built a legacy of love, and it was true. From that desperate moment in Fort Stockton in 1878, when a cowboy had seen worth in a broken girl and offered her a chance at a new life, had grown something beautiful and lasting. A ranch that still flourished, a family that spread across Texas and beyond, and a love story that was told and retold through generations. The ranch remained in the Young family for over a century, and the story of Clara and Yates became family legend. Great-great-grandchildren would visit the graves under the oak tree and hear how their ancestors had met, how Yates had told Clara she was worth more than a bottle and a coin, how that single act of kindness had rippled forward through time to create them. And in the telling and retelling, the story became more than just history. It became a reminder that every person has inherent worth, that love can heal the deepest wounds, that one moment of courage or compassion can change the trajectory of lives for generations. Clara and Yates had lived that truth, had built their lives around it, and had left behind something far more valuable than land or money. They had left behind a legacy of love that would never fade, a testament to the power of seeing someone's true worth and giving them a chance to flourish. And long after their physical forms had returned to the Texas soil they'd worked for so many years, their story lived on, inspiring and guiding those who came after them to be kind, to love deeply, and to remember that every person is worth far more than they might appear in their darkest moment. The ranch that Yates had built and Clara had made a home still stood, still prospered, still sheltered generations of family who carried forward the values and love that had been planted on that dusty street in Fort Stockton so many years ago. And sometimes, on quiet evenings when the sun set in brilliant colors over the western hills, it seemed you could almost see two figures sitting on the porch, hands clasped, watching their legacy unfold with satisfaction and joy. Their story was complete, their love eternal, their impact immeasurable. From desperation and despair had grown hope and love and family, and the cowboy who had seen worth in a broken girl and the woman who had learned to believe in herself had built something that would last forever. Not in grand monuments or wealth, but in the hearts and lives of everyone who came after them, carrying forward the simple but profound truth that Yates had spoken on that long-ago day. You're worth more than that. And Clara had believed him, and together they had proved it true in every way that mattered.